Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dojo Live this Thursday, January, I think it's 19th of 2023. My name is Kim Lantis, and joining me as co-host, as always, my pleasure to be with America Guerrero.
Hello, hi, Montana, hi,
Hello.
Kim.
Hi, America. And of course, the guest of honor, Montana Butsch, who is the CEO and founder of Spotivity. Montana, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's awesome. It's going to be great to talk all about what's up with Spotivity and teens and how we're helping them tap into their best versions of their best selves, their future selves, and making it fun and engaging while we do that. But before we get into Spotivity and its specifics, we'd love to get to know a bit more about you, Montana. What's your story, your passion? What's led up to Spotivity?
Yeah, people think it's funny when I lead or give them a tidbit of information that when I was a teenager, I used to run with graffiti crews and get chased by cops. That's definitely not something people lead with. But yeah, I'm a Chicago kid, born and raised in the inner city. Excuse me. And my mother was British, so I have a dual citizenship. And so, my story started as a teenager in Chicago looking for something to do. And ultimately just kind of fell into the sport of rowing. I happened to go to the only high school in the area, in the state, in fact, that had a team. And subsequently, was on the team for a number of years, ended up getting recruited, was recruited by Ivy League schools. That led me to go to the University of Pennsylvania. And that was never a goal of mine, right? That was never something that was a target. My parents didn't go that route. My parents weren't athletes. They supported my endeavors, of course. But it was also just by luck and happenstance that I went to the school and I fell in love with the sport, and it led me to ultimately Oxford University. I rowed for Oxford, tried out for the Olympics, though I wasn't good enough at that point. Those pathways were just kind of luck of the draw. And that led to me coming back to Chicago. I started an inner city rowing nonprofit. So that was trying to give back to the community that I effectively grew up in. And that led to a lot of Hispanics and African Americans on the city's south and west side participating in rowing. I did that for 11 years. And, all of those experiences have led to Spotivity, which effectively is trying to give teens access. I understand, and I was the recipient of the benefits of that type of access. And I saw that there were many pathways to achieve that type of access. For me, it was rowing. For others, it could be other things. And so my 11 years running an agency from scratch, I understood the program side of things. And as a teen, I understood the teen angle. And so that kind of led to the germination of the idea that is now Spotivity.
Wow. And I think also this leads a lot into the why. And I super get it, because you're talking about paths in this branch, what your life may have turned out to be had you not gotten into rowing, right? It could have been a much more difficult journey, I think. Yeah.
Oh, without a doubt. Clearly I probably would have found something. I'm very lucky to have found rowing, and that took me all over the world. Some of my closest friends come from those times, and those are life skills that I learned. But that is not to take away from the similar life lessons that someone that's involved heavily in acting would also learn, or someone that just wants to volunteer, or someone that wants to be stuck in the lab and be a scientist. It doesn't really matter.
I think I was going to this proverbial sort of life raft, right? This life-changing event that had you not been able to get involved in it, you may have continued down your troubled teenage path to lead to a...
Oh, I wasn't troubled. The cops never caught me when I ran.
I love it. So Spotivity, you've already hinted here at things like acting and other, forms of art and expression. Exactly what are you doing at Spotivity?
Yeah, so for Spotivity, there's no differentiation between activity type. I was an athlete and I wanted to be an athlete. So that tracked for me as a teenager. But I wanted to find a way where kids knew or had access to the unknowns, right? You don't know what you don't know. But within a technical tool, it's possible. If you account for the wide breadth of all the things that you could possibly do, you create a landscape by which you can then start to tackle those unknowns. Now, for an underserved population, maybe the unknowns are larger, right? Based on the affluence of the household based on the the ability to try different things. There is cost elements to a lot of stuff. Invariably, those that are on the poorer side of the socioeconomic spectrum have less access, and so functionally they might know less, right? But that also doesn't discount the fact that rich people have problems too, and they're still looking for stuff that they belong to. Lord knows I went to a relatively affluent high school. It took me 90 minutes on 2 trains and 2 buses to get to that school. I was one of the city kids, but a lot of those kids too are kind of rudderless, and they're looking for stuff, and it's not their fault that their parents are rich. And so the same situation, exists for both populations. And so then the question becomes, how do you account for the wide array of things? And then how do you kind of deconstruct a teenager so that you can create all the connections? And that's ultimately what we were tasked to do. And luckily, I have investors that are supportive of that long-term vision. And that's where I was luckily able to get a university as a partner, Utah State University, and Dr. Travis Dorsch, who also gave a TED Talk kind of similar to mine and similar subject matter. We've become friends, and now we're working together on this project, because ultimately we had to figure out a way to deconstruct a teen, and we had to figure out ways to map it to not only physical but also non-physical activities, but also to college majors and careers, right? There's all these through points, and it's actionable. It's just people don't want to do the work. And so, luckily we have time, we have patience, and we have some amount of funding to be able to do the work. And subsequently, that's what we've been able to launch.
Nice, beautiful, which I think is a great lead into the actual and specific topic of today's conversation,
which is spot your activity, develop your passion, and achieve your goals. How does data and creative thinking superpower teen decision making? Please share with us, why did you choose? Well, you already told us about the why did you choose this topic, but how does it work?
Yeah. So I think we can all agree, like, you understand the traditional story, right? You have a group of friends, and typically the decisions that those group of friends make are fairly similar, right? One person plays basketball, then everyone else in that group fundamentally will go and play basketball. People don't vary they don't go too far from the herd. But inevitably, not a lot of people are passionate about those choices. They just do what their immediate peer group does. But if kids have that itch to say, well, there might be something more, or I'm curious about these other things, I saw stuff on TV that I might like to do, or I just haven't found something that I want to do, how the hell do I go about doing it? And so for me, the lesson I learned at Chicago Training Center was really apropos to what we're doing here, right? I'd go to high schools with 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 kids. I'd talk in large auditoriums, and I'd be able to deconstruct this rather kind of esoteric sport of rowing to a population that would never consider doing it, let alone maybe most of them don't even know how to swim. And I would talk about the physical attributes that go well with rowing. Typically, being tall helps, having determination helps. But by and large, rowing is kind of a learned thing, whereas I would argue track and field, if you are a track athlete, if you are a 100-meter dash runner, let's say, you're either fast or you're not, right? And some of that is clearly genetic. So those are two examples, and they're kind of extreme. What I'm saying there is that rowing is kind of a learned thing, whereas track and field might be more genetically aligned. And there's hundreds of potential physical activities and also, non-physical activities, debate being an example of one, right? And so what Dr. Dorsch and I did was we basically deconstructed all of those potential activities, and we mapped them against personality traits. We mapped them against physical traits. We took into account growth spurts. We took into account things like emotional intelligence and positivity as ways to kind of modify the end results. We're not here to be prescriptive. So you ask about the process. Clearly we need to pull teenagers that use the app because we need to know about them. Otherwise, we have nothing to bank all of our research on. So they need to give us this information. We don't share it with anyone, but it's that information that we leverage against all of the data sets that we've created that basically deconstruct all the activities and the outputs. And ultimately that creates then a running list, for those students to consider. And so when I talk to teens and try to dumb it down for them a little bit, I say, first, the question is, do you know what you don't know? And invariably, after a little bit of thought, the teenagers come correct and say, no, of course I don't know what I don't know. It would be a fallacy to say otherwise. A couple of kids think that they know what they don't know, and then they quickly course correct when they think about it after a little bit.
I I would argue that most of adults need to course correct as well.
I know, right? I know. It's a fun conversation. Talking to teenagers is awesome. And so then I said, fine, that's good. But then if we were to tell you how to access all the unknowns, your world has just now become wider. And the way that we do that is by you telling us who you are and then us mapping. And as it's not prescriptive, they now just get a list of things that track for them. Now they need to do the last mile, right? We are not a program provider. We don't provide the Taekwondo class. We don't provide the Spanish tutoring. We don't provide the job. We don't provide the internship. But we tell them what things would track for them so that they now are armed with information by which they can do informed searching on their end. With the
Like,
caveat,
for example, something as simple as calligraphy. I could take a calligraphy class and I can turn this into a career. Like,
oh,
who knew?
100%, right?
Yeah.
Who knew? Who knew? And, the exciting thing is that we have, I'm based in Chicago, so we were able to map 12,000 programs in Chicago. So in Chicago, it's a little bit different than if you were in Manhattan, for example. If you're in Manhattan or if you're in Auckland, New Zealand, or if you're in Sydney, Australia, you can still use the app and it gives you that helpful information by which you can make informed decisions and do informed searching on your own. But in Chicago, not only do you do that, but we have a mapping mechanism that shows you where those programs are. And ultimately, that's a self-feeding mechanism because any program anywhere can launch themselves on Spotivity free of cost. And then they now become mapped within our overall ecosystem. It's just,
Cool.
It takes a while to do mapping. And right now we're focused, in Chicago and the whole Chicagoland area, and then we'll just build out.
In
Cool.
terms of technology and marketing, do you utilize social networks to get in touch with them, or how do you capture their attention? Because my generation, I went to the United States to do my sophomore year in 2013, and everything was so different than now. I can see the movies that with the phones and everything, you can access to a lot of information and to get guidance. So how do you use TikTok, or how do you adapt?
Oh man, yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And when you think about what we're doing, there's such a thing called a double-sided marketplace, and that's effectively kind of what Spotivity is, and that's just business school parlance. But it is a way in which to look at a business proposition, and for us, that's what we have. Right on one side, we have programs that are either delivered by a school or independent, but on the other side, you have the teens, and you could argue on the other side, you also have the teen parents. Right? We would preferably go to the teen first rather than the parent because we'd rather it not be top down. If it's top down, then parents. Teens will rebel. If it's bottom up, then parents just need to know about it because their teens are on it. But that means that we have, we're on all the channels. We haven't quite figured out TikTok, but we're on, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of those places. But you're dealing with different audiences at every turn, right? A post that I would want to send to engage a teen is not what I would send to engage a parent, or not what I would send to engage a program provider. So that is a little bit of kind of the riddle that's before us, right? How to go about doing that is the open question. I mean, how to do it effectively. We engaged the hip hop community and we did a thing called the Mic Drop Challenge. That was super fun. We got a bunch of, hip hop stars. Some of them by today's standards are maybe a little bit past their prime because, they're not in the ear of the teens nowadays, but they were in my ear when I was a teen. And nevertheless, that was, a couple TikTok series that we did. We've done 2 of them. We'll look to do a 3rd. And that was fun. The majority of teens like hip hop as a musical narrative. So we try to leverage that. And so we're just trying to figure out how best to engage the network effects. And I think the upcoming pilot that we're doing in Chicago and also St. Croix in the Bahamas is really interesting because it affords a tremendous opportunity to show kind of the full circle of what we're offering, because it's not just getting kids engaged in after school activities or for the city to benefit from a public health improvement because kids are off the streets. It's also to engage local vendors and local retailers to be part of the solution. And that's what we're looking to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that leads to, you mentioned part of my next question. One thing I think America's question is, how do you get them to use Spotivity, and then how do you keep them using Spotivity? And I guess, so that I have a 2-part question. We can talk about that engagement component in terms of usability. What's it look like? Is this small doses? How long does it take them to do their self analysis and get some suggestions and things, versus, okay, like I got the suggestion, it worked. What else do you got for me? Or these engagements to get them motivated in these activities? What does that look like?
Yeah, no, 100%. So the correct way to think about us from the user perspective is we are a utility for us as an app, for a teen to use us, we're utility. We're not social media. We're not a game, though we gamify engagement and we do offer social media connections within the app. We are neither of those things. We are a utility. And there's very few utilities that are directed at the teen market, mainly because it's extraordinarily hard. What teen gives a crap about a utility on their phone, right? They typically wouldn't. So that is the hurdle that we need to, and there's no way around it, right? I can't say it's anything but we are a utility. Are we a fun utility, et cetera, et cetera? Well, those are that, that's what we're aiming to be, so that there is that engagement in terms of, a teen accessing it and answering all the questions that we put out. Probably less than 5 minutes of thought. We'll have them rifle through the questions. They're all embedded in form. They're all embedded as a poll. It's pretty easy to do. So a teen that wants to set up their profile, pretty simple. On the flip side, how do we engage them so they want to be involved long term? And this is what comes to the point system that we spoke about, off air a little bit as well, is there's an embedded reward scheme. And so what's happening in Chicago and St. Croix, and we just finished an accelerator program in St. Croix, which is the connection. And selfishly, it's an excuse to go to an island for work, which is never a bad deal if you can get it, especially if you live in Chicago, right?
It's Chicago in January, February.
I know, right? Yeah, get the hell out of here. So at that point, we have a system by which points are accrued by every time they do something. A kid, use me as an example, I would have to go to rowing practice. I also volunteered. And I also filled out the polls on the app. These are all 3 examples of things that I, as a user, would generate points for. Now, those points immediately result in 2 things. They result in an online leaderboard, which is personal to me, personal to my school, and personal to the whole spotivity ecosystem. So in that way, it's kind of a game, right? If all 3 of us knew each other and we were using spotivity, we could use those leaderboards as a way to challenge each other. But it doesn't really matter, but it does, right? It depends on the kids' perspectives.
I think most people, particularly teenagers, are inherently competitive.
Yeah, without a doubt, right? And the exciting thing that comes from those transactional points, especially if they're going to stuff, is we also afford the kids the opportunity to get an online and downloadable transcript of their out-of-school time activity. So that's extraordinarily important when kids are going on to college, right? How do you memorialize what you do outside of school, right? I would tell the recruiter, yeah, I'm on the rowing team. They would see proof of that. But if they actually knew how many hours in a week or a month or a year I spent, that might tell a more interesting story. Or how many times did I volunteer? How many times did I do other stuff? That's hard to memorialize in a traditional school environment, right? You get your GPA, you get your transcript academically, but you don't get all the other stuff. So we're able to memorialize all of that, and we put that on our rewards page. So
it's something that might not even occur to the individual to keep track of. I don't think it ever occurred to me. Like, I think back to my teenage years, going even further back. America said 2013, her sophomore year. Well, I graduated. I was a senior in 2000. So, but back then, I'm like, I did Key Club and other volunteering things, but I never had to register of, in this year it was 100 hours of community service.
Yeah. And especially in the time and trying to get into schools is harder than ever, right? Just memorializing all that stuff is extraordinarily helpful. And we allow that to happen pretty easily. And so that we've baked in early. And so that's done. That's what these point systems allow based on the app. There's a check-in function based on the location you're going to and the timestamp. These are all governed by the program providers that are offering those systems, which is why we're not just an app for user, but we're a SaaS program for program providers in schools, right? So that's the double-sided marketplace coming into play. But again, we're talking about teens. So the exciting thing for them here is in Chicago and in St. Croix, I have a number of providers. These are coffee shops, hair salons, clothing providers, restaurants, record stores, like you name it. I don't know what kids like. I mean, I think I'm super cool, and people say I look younger than I am, but I'm 44. Clearly, I'm not cool. But I don't know what kids like, but I can give them a wide array of things.
You're definitely cool, Montana, because if you're not cool, then I'm not cool. So you are cool.
Tell my kids that. My 11-year-old kids definitely don't think that at all. So in St. Croix, but also in Chicago, we have, I think, 25 vendors in Chicago. I think we're 17 or so in St. Croix. St. Croix is a much smaller island, right? where they're willing to allow those teens to come into their store to then transition the points that they've accrued for points off of goods and services. And that's apropos to anywhere. We just need to show the proof of concept. So in St. Croix, we're going to show, they're going to be able to get a, bowling game and free bowling shoes. The bowling alley is a big deal in St. Croix, right? And there's only one. In fact, here, I can share my screen super quick so you can see.
Yeah, please do.
And super quick. I have the website up, so that should be all right.
Bowling was a big deal when I grew up too. And
it's always fun, right? Throwing rocks is always good.
90s.
Yeah. Who doesn't like to throw rocks? I showed my kids The Big Lebowski, and they thought that was funny. So this is the page. It'll launch in a couple of weeks. There's a video.
Hold on 1 second. I'm not seeing the screen share. Are you, America?
No.
Okay. There it goes. It's going. It's going. Now we can. Now we can. Perfect.
Technology, right? So this is a page that will launch in a few weeks. It's the rewards page. There's going to be an explainer video that you'll see. Mm-hmm. Now, the transcript that I mentioned, you'll see it right here, right? It'll be double-sided because it extends throughout all the years of high school, which means it can capture a lot of information. And everything a user does ultimately gets memorialized, and so it'll always show up on the transcript.
That's going to be so convenient too, not just to have a transcript, but to even find, I don't know, do kids still have to write essays these days when they apply to colleges and things?
Well, now there's open AI, right? So now we have computers writing essays.
But it helps you, to trigger your brain and think, what can I write? Where can I start?
Yeah, right. It's just easy. It's just a no-brainer, right? But no one's done it and no one's done the work. So here we are. And we offer it. We want to encourage use. So we have ways in which the kids can get it, either pay for it if they don't have a lot of points, or they can just use points to get it reduced or for free, right? Because we want to encourage activity. That goes to your point of usability. Ultimately, a kid will use our app maybe 5 minutes a week. It doesn't take long to check in the stuff. You might want to go into the in-app forum and talk to people, but by and large, it's passive engagement, but it's continual passive engagement. And so when we're looking here, this is the Chicago example. So you can see here, we're getting some of the logos here, but Definitive Selection, they're a hip hop clothing brand. They have points, $15 off a purchase of $25 or more. Okay. It needs to be significant. So my mom was asking me, she's like, don't you think that these points and what they're getting is kind of a little bit aggressive? And I said, well, if you're CVS or Walmart, yes, because there you only get, pennies on the dollar for stuff. And it's not really, apropos for excitement for a teen, but I can't afford to go that route. These need to be significant for the kids.
$15 off 25. That's more than half.
And so this is just Chicago, right? And so you can see all these stores. This is located in the Pilsen environment and also in Bridge Park, two communities. And we just got a local big brand, Big City Optical, and they're a big deal, and they want to be involved with us, and that's great. So they're going to give us the details, and kids will be able to get really nice designer sunglasses. Like, who knew? So this is Chicago, and then there's a tab over for St. Croix, and again. These are all places that will come online for St. Croix, and we will see what happens. It's kind of like a big experiment because we don't know, how this will ultimately work. However,
I think it should work. I mean, we continuously are aging ourselves on this show, Montana. But I was growing up in the 80s, and I remember very vividly the book it program that Pizza Hut had, where your teacher would monitor how many books you were reading, and for however many books you get like a little star, and you had a pin. And if you took your full pin to the pizzeria, you'd get like a free personal sized pan pizza or something like that. I loved it. It really encouraged reading.
On that vein, my son was asking me, Dad, you need to offer a Harrier jet. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And my son's 11 years old. Well, he just watched, there was a show that went over in the early 90s. Pepsi offered points, and they messed up hugely. At the end of their advertisement, they offered a military grade Harrier jet for something like 3 million points. And it was a joke. It was intended as a joke. However, the story, and this is what we watched, and my son was so excited, there was no disclaimer. So there was one person, of course, that got the requisite 3 million points and then took them to court to get the Harrier jet. So it's super, super funny. And that's where my son came up with the idea that we need to offer a jet. So maybe later we'll have something a little bit more.
With a disclaimer.
Yeah, with a very large disclaimer, right? But, he was on point. So, that kind of shows the full circle, because at one point you could look at this as a public health, an addressal of a public health need, right? Why do teens do stupid stuff outside of school? Mainly they're bored and they don't know what to do with their time, right? And they don't know where activities are. I don't think they all want to do nefarious activity. They would rather do other stuff. And so from a city perspective, this helps solve that, because not all city agencies can solve all the crises. And there's a whole bunch of public and private institutions as well where kids could be funneled. And not only, they need to be funneled, but in an intelligent way that actually tracks with that kid. Because if the kid doesn't enjoy the activity, they're just going to bolt, right? So if you can find a way to help match, then that just makes it all the better. And so for us, that's why it's a global thing. I mean, we're in 23 different countries because we can be as a technical tool. Everyone that we're in right now is English speaking, for obvious reasons. It's really expensive to change the app into foreign languages, but that's something that we ultimately need to do. And a lot that's on my plate right now is engaging the educational community and the school community and the city community to understand that this plays well and nicely with their already existing concerns about how to engage teens. We're very much value add, and we should be a bolt on, to their system. Invariably, I get questions about, are we an ed tech app or not? And the answer is yes, but because we are aspects of ed tech for sure. But we're also a marketplace, and we're a market maker. And we're a teen engagement tool. And for us, the plan is to not stay focused on the 13 to 18 demographic, but we want to add on to it the 18 to 24 demographic, because functionally it's similar questions, maybe different outputs, and the utility works the same, but they're, young people are looking to make use of their careers or their trade school degree. They're trying
or
to
change. You don't, maybe you don't know what you don't know. And you think that, that was my story. I started studying one major, and then halfway through I was like, yeah, I'm not liking this. And if this is what I'm supposed to be doing for the rest of my life, would be a pretty dumb move. And so I think that's a really beautiful message as well, right? For anyone, really, it's never
it makes sense, right? It just makes sense. And it allows, a certain amount of efficiency in the marketplace, because at the end of the day, schools are going to get kids that actually want to be there for the right reasons. Employers are going to get, new employees that want to be there for the right reasons, that scratch their itch. I mean, it's kind of funny. You might think, that someone's a success if they're a doctor, but if their whole family are nothing but doctors and they were told that they could be nothing but a doctor ever since they were younger, they might have the aptitude to be a doctor. Subsequently, they become one, but they might be miserable. And that sucks. Find something else that doesn't make you miserable. But how do you do that, right? And so for us, it's all kind of about the economies of proper alignment, and it works for everyone, and it becomes this huge virtual feedback loop that works really, really well.
Your community
quick
builder
question
as well.
Yeah. I know that your focus are teenagers, but what about if there is an adult who wants to finish high school, for example? Do you think that this adult could adapt this methodology that you provide in your platform, the points and everything, or is just another focus?
Well, that is an interesting point. I mean, people's personality and the inputs that we take, they don't really change. Now, someone's positivity or emotional intelligence can oscillate a little bit based on life experiences. I mean, my best friend unfortunately died when I was in high school. I imagine there was a huge before and after positivity and emotional intelligence results for me around that period of time, right? But my personality was always my personality. So to answer your question about someone that's slightly older, a 20-year-old that hasn't finished high school, the information that we did be able to give them as outputs is still apropos to who they are as a person, right? And so it's still hugely informative. And it's not like when we move to the 18 to 24 demographic, are we a materially different platform? Not at all. It just means that the outputs are going to be a little bit different. So I would advise, and we can't take anyone under the age of 13, but that doesn't mean we can't take someone older, right? And so they would still be able to benefit from those outputs.
The outputs, yes, but registering your activities and
I'm 20 years old trying to join the Little League baseball team. That's a little bit illegal, but that's been done many, many times before. But yes.
That would be one way to not stay untroubled. You would have
Yeah,
problems with the cops at that
that
point.
comes out of the wash for sure.
Montana, this has been a very amazing show, a lot of insight. I am blown away just by your approach. I think this absolute high level of empathy and this ability to tap in, as strange as this should be, we've all were teenagers one day, but I think at one point, but we get a little self-removed from that. And I think you're really, really on to something, and it's refreshing and exciting. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much for the platform and being able to talk. I mean, I can't be thankful enough for the investors I have that are willing to stand behind me, because this is not, an immediate gratification system, right? It's not like we're selling a product, so to speak. I mean, we are to schools and to the programs for sure, but it's a SaaS product that ultimately, at the end of the day, the focus is always on the teens and how do we benefit them, and how does that work? And that in turn requires for this very, very long tail, and it's going to take a while to actually take root. The way that I tried to expedite that is through hip hop. I'm trying to get involved with people like Dr. Dre out in California. He started high schools, right? That would make sense. Tag him on the video, right?
Okay.
In the eye of mine, him and Dr. Dre, but also, there's a lot of people that are looking to give back to communities as well. So we're trying to tap in, and that would kind of throw some accelerant on the fire, so to speak, and getting involved with schools and school systems again would help. And this pilot test would help. But, what we're doing, I think, stands the test of time. I can talk to anyone and they can't really poke holes in it, other than they tell me it's going to be very hard. Like, that's proven to be true. But that doesn't mean that you don't do it. It just means that you have to be up for the long-term fight.
Which I think leads us to the final question in terms of you as an individual. What are some maybe words of wisdom, some do's and don'ts you might offer to people who are looking to do something similar to you?
Well, don't do something similar. I don't want any competitors.
No, I mean similar in the sense of starting with an idea, following your passion. I think also being a non-technical background with a technical product.
Oh yeah, I don't know how to code at all. So I guess there's no way around it. Like, you got to do your homework. The fact that I've gone to really good schools doesn't mean that I'm smart enough to pull all this off, but it does mean I have access to a lot of people that can kind of poke holes and that I can talk to. And you want to have those conversations. I am not the owner of all available knowledge. And so I have a really good idea, I think, and I believe it, but I believe it more now than I did before, because of all the conversations I've had subsequently and the access that was granted to the people that I've known and the institutions I've been involved in. So for anyone that wants to do something like this, whatever it is, use your resources wisely, and don't think that you are the bastion of all knowledge. I mean, you have to back yourself, right? You have to believe that you're going to come out on top. But you have to be open to criticism, and you have to be able to push back against criticism you think is unwarranted. But the only way you can do that is if you can deconstruct your idea such that you're comfortable with where you're coming from. And you have to be pliable enough to change and pivot if someone points out something that you can't retort appropriately, right? And be okay with that. And so it's tough. I think that, some people catch lightning in a bottle right away. That's probably more in the product space. This is not really that. So I wasn't expecting it to be lightning in the bottle type thing. Maybe Snoop Dogg pushes us and it takes off, super quick, but you don't plan on those types of things. But yeah, being able to do your homework, back yourself, have a certain amount of historical experience in the space that you're in definitely is helpful. I ran an organization for 11 years. So I know not only teens and parents, but I know what a program. So it wasn't that far afield. But to your last point about how does a non-technical founder do it? Again, it just comes down to homework. For me, I was able to take a look at what I wanted, and I realized that what I needed to accomplish didn't rely on tech being so cutting edge that it was a system that I couldn't commodify. In fact, I couldn't commodify it. If I could lay out what I wanted to do, I could find a tech firm to do what I needed to do, and it became a commodity. And that then gave me the advantage to do a whole lot of other things. Now, that's not true if you're in the area of AI. That's not true if you're in other areas that require super high level thinking on a tech that I don't have. Spotivity is not that, and I knew it. So I was able to go a different route. And for me, this is where, don't be too proud. I knew that I also needed help. And so that's where I was able to pursue the university partnership. And we were able to get Utah State in because I needed someone smart to bounce an idea off with me about how are we going to do this deconstruction. And so you can't be too proud, but you do have to be able to back yourself. But you do need to be able to bring the right people in. And that just comes from asking a lot of questions, talking to a lot of people. And, ultimately, don't be shy to take the shot, and that's, I guess, all the advice that I can give. But it is hard. It's extraordinarily hard. And it's not that I wish I've done something else. I'm really satisfied by doing what I'm doing, but there's no guarantee of success. So I need to be really careful. But also I believe in what we're doing and I believe in the product, and I'm willing to effectively bank my life on it, but it's a calculated struggle for sure.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think do your homework, lean on the network that you've created, and have some humility. I think that's great. Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you again, Montana, for joining us. We wish you and Spotivity nothing but success with what you are building. Congratulations there again. Stick around as we go off air for just a minute. But before we do, America, what do we got coming up tomorrow?
Yay! Tomorrow we have our last show of the week. Is going to be with Daniela Gamboa and Fermín Chavez. This is our last episode, right? Or our first
number 3 of 4.
Number 3 of 4. Thank you for that. Tomorrow we're going to talk about Beyond the Imagination. How will mixed reality from film, entertainment, and pop culture open new possibilities in digital fashion and more? Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific.
Part 3 of the Metaverse series here on Dojo Live every Friday this January. Cool. All right. So see you tomorrow, everyone, 10 o'clock Pacific. Until then, stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Montana. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.